Agriculture is too much talked about as part of the environmental problem, but as part of the solution. Agriculture is one of the biggest opportunities we have in the world to fight climate change. And I think producers want to be part at the table there. And, what we need is the tools and the technologies to allow, our growers to be at the table and to help and to be able to win economically from that as well.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of Fireside Chats with Erin. I'm your host, Erin Gowerluck. As Executive Director of the Grain Growers of Canada, I started this podcast to serve as a forum for real conversations with industry influencers and policymakers. Today's podcast marks the final conversation of 2020, but the first in a 3-episode series with ag sector visionaries. We could all use a little inspiration as we say goodbye to what has been a very challenging year, and consider the possibilities that this new year could bring. That's why I'm very excited to welcome our first guest and ag sector visionary, Karn Manhas, the founder and CEO of Terramera. Karn is an entrepreneur with over 15 years of experience in leadership roles in government, project management, community and business development. He's responsible for the vision and the strategic direction of Terramera and has raised over $82 million to build, scale, and execute on that plan. He's a frequent speaker on issues related to sustainability, making clean food affordable, feeding the world, and building innovative organizations. Karn has led several companies and has a diverse set of experiences, including being elected the youngest member of the Legislative Assembly in the province of British Columbia. He holds a Juris Doctor in Law from the University of British Columbia and a Bachelor of Science in Biology and Biotechnology from McGill University. Karn, thank you for stopping by for a fireside chat. It's great to finally meet you.
It's great to finally meet you as well, Erin. It's a pleasure to be here.
I think that, a lot of our listeners may be relatively familiar with most of the guests that we have on this podcast. But I think that for many of our listeners and our farmer members, today's conversation is going to serve as an introduction to you and your work and to the organization that you have founded and that you lead today, Terramera. So let's start there maybe. Tell us a bit about Terramera, the organization, where it operates, and what it seeks to accomplish.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. And it's, I think it's very true. So Terramera has actually been around for over 10 years now. It started, we just celebrated our 10th year. It's started in 2010 while I was at UBC, actually on an argument around whether whether something like what we tried to do was actually possible, and that argument ended up. I didn't actually intend to start a company. It just it started as a really trying to prove myself right, and it turned into a set of technologies that's certainly really grown. So it's really started on an argument around the use of biologicals and whether natural and biological alternatives to synthetic chemicals could really work as well as the conventionals we're used to, and whether the organic farming was really just a niche area or a fad, because the materials and that were used to support it could really never be as effective. And so that became my background was in biology and biotech before, and plants and trees have evolved over tens of millions of years, some of the most sophisticated methods of being able to protect themselves naturally and thrive in some of the most difficult conditions. And it doesn't really make any sense that biologicals couldn't be as effective. But when you look at the market, over 97%, if you look at crop protection, 97% of the market is conventionals. And so the market doesn't agree that biologicals can be are as effective. And so why was that? And so what we started looking at is the technical issues that that stopped the kind of vast amount of biological materials that plants sort of naturally produce to protect themselves. What stopped those from becoming commercially viable? And one of the big problems with a lot of the biological ingredients are that they are oftentimes in the past they've been poorly understood. So people, would in organic farming would take extracts, and it would be mixes of different things. Where they wouldn't be well characterized on what was actually doing what work. Oftentimes they would break down too quickly. And the issue wasn't only that they weren't as effective, they weren't as consistent either. And so we the third area that we sort of had this aha moment was realizing that actually when you look at and characterize those materials, they're actually very different from the synthetic conventionals that we're able to use. And that's just part of how industry has developed. The synthetic materials we were able to use are all very small molecules, because that's what we could synthesize and produce very cheaply and effectively. But natural biologicals tend to be very, very large molecules. So those have different issues. But one of the major issues we thought was, with these large compounds is one of the problems that they are actually not being able to be taken up as effectively as the small molecules. So if you think about making, if you have a hole a particular size, and small molecules being the size of sand, you can pour a lot of sand through that hole. But if you have marbles in that and you're trying to pour marbles through, you only get a few through. And if you need the same amount of marbles or sand to be taken up into wherever you need it to be absorbed into, it takes a lot more work. So that's where we started a number of years ago, trying to understand better how we could increase the efficiency and uptake of materials. And that led to a technology we call Actigate. We didn't realize at the time we were really pioneering a new area of science. Today, the company holds over 250 patents globally, granted or pending. We have quadrupled in size over the last just since 2017. And a lot of the reason oftentimes I think in Canada, when folks might not be aware of Terramera, is because our work has been so global and has been pulled in different places, and particularly in the U.S. By over the past 10 years with an interest in this area of trying to make inputs more efficient. And so that has been one of the things that has driven the company forward over time. One of the interesting things that happened, though, over the last 3 or 4 years is once we realized that we had really stumbled onto something that was new, we did an investment round, our first one in 2016, and our investor said, you really need to find out what how big this space is, how much of this patent space that is actually possible, who else is doing this. And they also said, there's big companies in this space. How do you make sure that, this small Canadian company, that you have the ability to actually protect yourself from people getting around your patents? And we thought we'll never have as many people as, as Bayer or BSF or, Syngenta or Corteva might have, but in terms of scientists, but we had to be smarter about it. And so that's when we really started building out something that we haven't talked a lot about to date, but you'll hear us start talking more and more about, which is this data science platform, where we started to try to understand at a really detailed level what was happening when we applied materials. So we actually started modeling these molecules and tried to figure out where they actually needed to get to, and how we could more effectively get them to their intended site, and so they wouldn't be washed out into the soil and water. One quick little anecdote I talk about oftentimes is, oftentimes, if you look at medicine, in medicine, this whole idea of getting the right medicine to the right place has been a big area of pharmaceuticals and drug discovery for a long period of time, where, for example, if you have a heart medication, you want to make sure it gets to the heart. You don't want it, if it all ends up being taken, in the liver or kidney, it's not going to do that much for your heart. And in a similar idea, like, if you have a headache, we're not going to take, we're going to take an aspirin pill. We're not going to stand in a shower of aspirin water until we soak enough. If we did do that, eventually you would get enough aspirin to be absorbed through the skin for it to be effective, but it wouldn't be really effective unless it was designed for that purpose. Most of the aspirin would be dissolved in the water, washing over your body and going down the drain. And essentially, that's what we do in agriculture. And it's worked so far because it's been efficient, and with the synthetics we've been able to get enough absorption, but we need to use more and more each year. And one of the things that we found is that with Actigate, it works just as well on biologicals as it does on conventionals. And so we've started working with a lot of those major companies to apply this into their formulation so they can do more with less and reduce the synthetic load and have it be just as effective. But with that data science, we've actually started looking at not only the patents around this, but we were able to actually start tracking single molecules, because what we wanted to do is see, when you apply these molecules, what was actually happening. Were they getting into the plant? Were they getting into a disease that you wanted to apply it to? And we wanted to be able to track those really effectively. And what's amazing is we've been able to do that now. At the beginning, we were using these very expensive scientific methodologies to track molecules, but now we can do that just with imaging. And we've started applying that over the years to track not only the molecules we're spraying, but what's actually happening when we spray the plant to the plant itself. And so we can track things like sugar content or protein content just with imaging. And what's exciting about that is we have started to build out a system that we can start, over the years ahead, start allowing, growers access to, where they're not only able to get that insight around, when you treat your crop in a particular way, what's actually happening to the quality level inside that plant. And we're taking that one step further to even be able to track single molecules like what's happening in the soil. And that's what's next, where we can actually track things like soil carbon. And so it's becoming this continuum that that's building into, I think, a set of work that we're excited to do to be able to hopefully change how agriculture is done here at home, with farmers and ranchers across Canada, to transform how we do agriculture and make it more efficient and productive and profitable and sustainable. And I know that that's what we've talked to hundreds of farmers there. That's what they want to do as well. I think one of the things that we've seen is government wants to do something on climate, but they're challenged to see what they actually can do. And we're living in these old paradigms. And what we're trying to do is break those barriers, because I think one of the things I've been shocked about is, people don't understand how much the agriculture sector is hurting. I mean, farmers are hurting in Canada. The agricultural sector, farm gate incomes have dropped by over 50% in Canada since 2016. I mean, people don't know this. And there are serious issues that we need to do structurally and to help and ensure food security and the prosperity of the agriculture sector in Canada. And we can do that in a way that actually helps focus on both the economy and the efficiency of farmers' incomes, and also help support sustainability as well. We just have to break these old ways of thinking of, it's this against this, because we actually can work together and do both.
Thank you very much, Karn, and I appreciate your comments in that respect. And you've got me thinking a bit about when you talk about old paradigms and an old way of doing things. I think that really resonates with many of our farmer members, especially in light of Friday's announcement with respect to the increase in the carbon tax and
Right.
its application and the impact it will have on Canadian farms across the country.
Yeah.
There may be better ways to approach this issue and to ensure that Canadian farms are better positioned to be more sustainable. I don't want to oversimplify everything that you've just said, because I think there are many layers and different facets to what you're trying to accomplish here. And I understand the complexity and the scientific nature of a lot of it. Is there, to a certain extent, an objective to see organic farming done on a larger scale? And in addition to that, are we looking at more precise ways or more efficient ways to apply conventional products?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. One of the things that we're trying to break this old idea and this paradigm of organic and conventional farming, because what we really need to do is use data to see what's actually working well. And we need to have everybody, both farmers and producers on the field, be able to see the data from what they're in terms of what's working, and for policymakers and decision makers also to be able to use data rather than beliefs to be able to make decisions. Data is what speaks. And I think one of the things that you'll hear a lot more from us, we announced this plan to try to help support a global center for regenerative agriculture. And this is one of the things that we're working on, to use the data systems that we've built out to start getting those scaled out, so that we can actually start both collecting that data and have farmers use that data to be able to do two things. One, understand how beneficial management practices actually help create a change to their top line and their bottom line, and how they may actually be able to be affected to increase the amount of carbon that's sequestered, so that we can actually and three, that we actually accurately measure the amount of carbon that is actually being sequestered, so that farmers can have an additional income stream, rather than worrying about how they're actually going to be able to survive. Actually, we should be thinking about how we can actually engage our producers to help, not as part of the problem. Agriculture is too much talked about as part of the environmental problem, but as part of the solution. Agriculture is one of the biggest opportunities we have in the world to fight climate change. And I think producers want to be part at the table there. And what we need is the tools and the technologies to allow our growers to be at the table, and to help, and to be able to win economically from that as well. And so that's one of the things I like about regenerative agriculture, is we're breaking this paradigm between the old ideas of organic and conventional. One of the things about regenerative is it doesn't matter. I mean, you can, farmers across Canada, no matter if they're organic or conventional, have been starting to apply all, regenerative practices for years. And there's a lot more that we can do too. And if we can actually start quantifying what those are actually doing on farm, and show producers how they're economically affecting their crop output, and be able to show how on the one side, and on the other side show how they're actually sequestering carbon, and be able to prove to governments and carbon markets in a way that they can trust, this is how much carbon is actually being sequestered, then we can get producers actually paid for that carbon. And so that's what we're trying to do. We've actually developed a methodology for measuring soil carbon that's much cheaper than the physical methodology that we've used in the past, which is 92% accurate. Still requires us to go, to get a sample on the field, but we're actually over the coming years, we think we may be able to move beyond that, so that we can actually not have to go onto that field and get that sample, and be able to actually see across the field how carbon levels are increasing and decreasing. So yeah, I think it's not about scaling organic to take over conventional. It's how do we utilize the tools and technology that works for growers that are that doesn't have to fall in this bucket or that bucket. That growers can use this, this basket of tools and use what's best for them. And they can start making decisions for economic reasons, not because they're told and environment, and that the environmental benefits actually that they're producing actually helps them generate a better income as well, rather than looking at things like a carbon tax that is adding more cost to them. Looking at actually how growers can actually be part of the solution in ensuring that they're economically compensated for the work that they're doing as well.
I appreciate that comment. And the challenge with the carbon tax, as you likely well know, right, is it's being applied to farm fuels where currently we don't have an alternative to fossil fuels for a lot of practices like grain drying. So it is largely punitive in nature. But I want to talk to you a bit more about the Global Center for Regenerative Agriculture, because
Yeah.
this is new for you. This announcement was only made this fall that you had put together a proposal for the center, and the
Yeah.
center is intended to bring clean technology to farmers and ranchers in an effort to fight climate change
Yeah.
and to ensure Canada's prosperity by scaling regenerative agriculture. You've talked a little bit about the center. I don't know if there's anything more you want to say on that, but can you back things up a little bit maybe and help us to better understand what regenerative agriculture is?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So regenerative agriculture is really a set of tools and techniques and that are focused um, on increasing the health of the soil. And it's really simple. It's really an idea that you can apply certain tools and techniques that help to increase the health of the soil and start to more effectively pull carbon out of the atmosphere through plants and into the soil where it belongs. And one of the things we know is that the more carbon that you can pull and sequester into the soil, the better it is for farm productivity. We all know that when if you look at when we go to any farm and you have rich black soil, it's that tells you it's going to be very productive, and it's black because it's really high in carbon, and carbon is carbon gets maligned is and hit on a lot, but carbon is the base of all life. It's what we're made of. It's what plants are made of, and it's critical. Too much carbon in the atmosphere is yes, it's a problem. But if we can design systems that in our practices to pull more of that carbon out of the atmosphere into the soil, more carbon in the soil is great for farms. It's great for plants, and so it's a part of the agricultural system that we haven't thought as much about in the past. And I think we're learning in the past few decades, we've learned more and more about how valuable it is to be able to keep that carbon in the soil and not release it into the atmosphere, and also pull more and more carbon into the soil. And so regenerative agriculture is focused on that. How do you do that more effectively? What tools and techniques can we use? And it's blind to these kinds of belief systems like GMO, for example. GMO may be a big part of helping pull carbon out of the atmosphere, for example. There's one of the tools that we have looked at that's coming out of universities to help support this is there are traits that have been studied that pull up to 4 times more carbon out of the atmosphere into the soil, and you actually have healthier plants and you're building the soil. So these are all tools that that need to be considered. One of the things that we're really focused on is we need to get beyond beliefs and to concrete outcomes. What is it that we want to do economically, environmentally, and build in the tools that do that. And the Center for Regenerative Agriculture is focused on allowing Canada to actually be a leader in that, because regenerative agriculture, we'll hear more and more about it. It's been talked about for years now. It's going to be talked about more because I really think it's going to be the future of agriculture. Uh, and it's not like organic versus, organic has like, you have to do these things and then you'll get certified organic. Regenerative is really about outcomes. And and those outcomes are as much economic as they are ecologic. And when we talk about sustainability, oftentimes there's a focus only on the environment, but it's not sustainable if it's not economically sustainable as well. If it's not sustainable for people, it has to be fully sustainable. And that's one of the things that I love about regenerative agriculture is it actually is an opportunity for agriculture to solve climate change. The Earth's soils can hold much more carbon than the Earth's atmosphere. It's been estimated that we have about 1 billion tons of carbon too much in the atmosphere, and that's been part of the problem. And so as humanity is trying to reduce the amount of additional carbon that's going into the atmosphere, but agriculture has a unique role to play where it can actually not add more to the carbon. It can actually pull carbon out of the atmosphere into the soil and benefit with a positive ROI for doing that. And it's been estimated that if we were able to get regenerative agricultural techniques right and scale them to all of the world's farms, we could actually turn back the clock on climate change 100 years. So agriculture is ground zero for this. And it needs to be the place that everybody, governments, people who are interested in it need to be supporting farmers to do this right. But we need to have the tools to understand how this works, and we need to test those out so that farmers can trust that this is actually going to have a particular benefit, and everybody can trust that system. And right now, there's so much more that we need to know and understand, and that's the proposal on us building out the Center for Regenerative Agriculture is to test out what's working and what's not with farmers and getting that data across a large number of farms and actually helping support farmers to test out these different techniques and measure what's working and what's not at scale, allowing two things. One, for Canada to be a leader in this area, because it is, and it is something that will be a really important to the future of agriculture, allowing farmers to increase their income sources, building innovation in Canada that actually can not only change Canadian agriculture, but can lead the world, and generate an agricultural economy that is much bigger than our economy right now, rather than focusing on just keeping it to a certain level. How can we grow farm gate incomes, by 100%, by 200%, by 300%? We can actually do that with regenerative agriculture and bring young people back in by connecting technology and data with our food systems.
Karn, how long is all of this going to take? When you look at what you're building now with the center, at what point do you think we're going to be in a position where we can begin to implement on Canadian farms some of what you're currently studying through the center?
Yeah, I think so. We don't have to know all the answers to start implementing it. We're talking with there's a lot of interest from the BC provincial government that to really build out a regenerative agriculture network across the province. The federal government is we have a number of discussions to help support this as well. The government of Quebec actually announced an initiative on regenerative agriculture. We're hoping that all of the provinces start seeing that this is important, and we can actually start building a framework that even before we have enough information that we know we should be incenting farmers on certain activities,
Mm-hmm.
and start doing that work sooner rather than later. I think that I would love for it to be the summer of 2021, but we're focused on having a pilot introduced into British Columbia in 2022. There's no reason that we couldn't do that across other provinces in 2022 or even shortly after that. But we're focused in the coming year to start with a few farms to get that right, to consult and help build a framework on that both uses technology today and that governments can understand that how to use policy tools to incent farmers better. Alberta is one of the few provinces in the country that already does this to some degree. We can do that even much better, and help Alberta actually expand that level of support. But I think that within the next 2 years, we will have a system that we can really build on, and with some pilot farms as early as next year.
I'm happy to hear that, because I think that the sector, but certainly the government, is hungry for this conversation. They're looking right now, I think, at ways to incent the right practices. So I'm happy to hear that you're working in this space and that we'll have something a little more tangible. So I think that this conversation is one in a series of conversations with you, Karn, with respect to what you're doing. But I want to ask you a bit more when we look around the world.
As we move away from that, I just want to say it's really important to us that we work with you as well. Grain growers are central in for the Canadian agricultural industry, and we really want to work with you and your member producers to really make sure we get this right. And so we hope we can partner with you in ensuring that this is really help support producers across the country.
Well, you have a commitment from me that we are going to continue this conversation and pull our members into this conversation in the new year.
Great.
I want to provide them maybe with a tangible example of what may be happening in other countries around the world. And I wonder if we look to the Netherlands, for example, are they a good example of what you can do with regenerative agriculture? Maybe you can talk a bit about the role that regenerative agriculture may be playing in the Netherlands, or what other factors contribute to their success. Because when I was doing some research on your website, I was really shocked by the statistics. Canada has about 160 million acres of farmland by comparison to the Netherlands, which has about 2.5 million acres. Yeah. But despite the fact that we have 64 times more farmland, they generate over two times the number of agri-food exports by comparison to what we export here in Canada.
Yeah.
Why is that? What's happening in the Netherlands?
Amazing. For a tiny little country, you have, the Netherlands generally falls into it's in the top 2 food exporters or agricultural exporters in the world. So it's the US and the Netherlands. Canada is an important producer, but we're down at 6th. We should be in the top 2 because Canada has the land base and the production to be able to do that. It's about efficiency. Oftentimes, so the Netherlands is over 150 times more efficient than Canada in terms of production. It's astounding. And one of the key things in the Netherlands that's happens is they're really focused. For decades, they've been focused on how to get efficiency and use their engineering capacity to generate more efficiency out of every single acre. And they don't have a lot of acres, so they've really focused on making sure that they get the most out of every acre. And as a result, they have. And oftentimes we talk only about Dutch greenhouses, but it's not just Dutch greenhouses. If you look at it, it's both Dutch greenhouses and field agriculture. The Dutch are they have food security, they're self-sufficient, and they're able to focus on a lot of exports. Yes, those are exports in both food and non-food crops, but they've really honed in on how they're able to produce efficiently. They've only started on the idea of the ecological portion of it in recently, but actually Canada has that advantage. If we can look at what the Netherlands has done in terms of utilizing engineering and efficiency, and be able to think about data infrastructure as a piece of infrastructure for farms, just like irrigation and the other types of infrastructure are infrastructure. If we can think of data infrastructure in that way too, we can actually surpass meet or surpass the Netherlands. And how we can surpass them is by not only using that data in a way that's just focused only on efficiency, but also looking at regenerative. Because one of the things that studies have shown is if you can increase carbon into the soil, for every 1% increase, farmers, depending on the crop, actually see 20 to over 70% increase in farm productivity. Increases the nutrient value, it increases the actual yields, increases productivity, it increases protection against drought stress. It has so many benefits as we actually focus on that if we can focus on both of those things, efficiency and regenerative, Canada can actually be much more efficient than the Netherlands. And that would mean trillions of dollars of new economic activity to the Canadian economy. It would mean, over the next 20 years, millions and millions of new jobs moving into agriculture. I think agriculture is so exciting. It's the new frontier of what, of jobs in the economy in Canada if we get this right.
Well, that's why I'm really glad to talk to you today, because a big part of our narrative over the last couple of months, in light of the pandemic and the challenges it has presented, is that agriculture as a sector can be well positioned. I would argue that some changes, to your point, need to be made to really position the sector to drive the economic recovery and beyond. So I think this is certainly a key ingredient in all of that. I want to ask you, though, personally, why is all of this work so important to you?
Well, I mean, I think it's one of the things that's always been important to me is what kind of world do I want to live in, and what kind of world do I want my to leave behind and for my families and future generations to live in. And I think one of the things that is really important, as a kid, all of my siblings went into medicine. I was the black sheep. I was the middle of 5 kids, and so 4 of them are physicians. And health has always been a really critical thing. We faced some very difficult health situations amongst in our family, even while we were growing up. And I think that really impacted me and my siblings quite a lot. And one of the things that over my lifetime I've tried to really understand is where is this all coming from? Because we look at the fact that we're living longer, but we're also seeing all kinds of issues that we never really saw before. Like this whole issue of celiac is really interesting. And so the other thing that really has frustrated me is this kind of division that people kind of take sides. And I think just my personality is very pragmatic. The way I look at things is, how can we move to a system that is what we all want to a world that we all want to live in a way that actually makes sense and is pragmatic and sustainable. And if we try to say focus on just one area, it's not really sustainable. And I think that's how I look at everything in life is, we have to balance and make sure that you've got sustainability across all areas. I do that in my personal life and with the business. And the environment has always been really important to me. Obviously, I was a biologist, and the way I think about it is, I think that we are dealing with complex systems, and we are trying to do our best to be able to do what's right and feed ourselves, feed the world. And there's always more that we can learn about how we can actually be in line with those systems. And that's one of the things that's really interesting about this time and age. We haven't really, those things have been really hard for humans to be able to understand. When we go and apply something into the field, and it's hard for us to be able to see what effect any one thing that we do is going to be able to have. But where we are today with data and technology, we have this set of tools we've never had in our lifetimes before. And so if we can use that well, we can actually start to get an understanding of how we can better live in line with with systems. As a biologist, I always think about getting to homeostasis. Like how homeostasis is balance. So how do we get into a balance that actually is a real positive balance? And that's one of the things that just, when I started learning about regenerative, the concept of regenerative, and I'm hoping that it doesn't get taken away by an interest group. But what I love about regenerative is it's this concept that's even more than sustainability. We're not just making things at a level that is, equal. It's better with every year we do it. The economics are better with every year. The impact for people is better every year, and the impact on the environment is better every year. So we're actually leaving the planet and our systems in a way that's better for every year we do agriculture. And that's really exciting if we can get that right. And so I'm excited for us to be a part of that. I'm excited to work with anybody who else finds that exciting, because that just, like, it wakes me up. It drives me during the day. And I think, like, if we can really get this right, this sounds trite, but it'll change the world, and we can start here at home.
Well, I don't doubt that it will. And I think that this is a fantastic conversation on which to end a year of conversations, largely focused on discussing some of the challenges that this year has brought. So you are clearly very passionate about what you do. And I appreciate that you have brought some of that passion and excitement and enthusiasm to this conversation, and doing exactly what you'd hope we would do. Inspire us to think about the possibilities for 2021, because we could all use a little of that right now. So with that, I want to say thanks very much, Karn, and I commit to having a follow-up conversation with you in the new year, because we've got to follow your work here and get our members involved in some of what you're trying to accomplish. So thank you.
Thank you, Erin. It's been a pleasure being here, and I look forward to working with you. I really think it has been a hard and challenging year, but it is an exciting time to be in agriculture right now. I think it's at the crossroads of some of the greatest innovations and the greatest solutions to the biggest problems that the world has been facing.
Thanks, Karn.
Thanks,
and
Erin.
thank you, everyone, for listening to the 13th episode of Fireside Chats with Erin, and our first in a series of these inspired conversations for a new year. I wish you all the best of the holiday season and look forward to talking to you again in 2021. Until then.